5 Children and It by E. Nesbit. Chapter 6. A Castle and No Dinner. The others were to be kept in as a punishment for the misfortune of the day before. Of course, Martha thought it was naughtiness and not misfortune, so you must not blame her. She only thought she was doing her duty, you know. Grown-up people often say they do not like to punish you, and that they only do it for your own good, and that it hurts them more than it hurts you. And this is really very often the truth. Martha certainly hated having to punish the children quite as much as they hated to be punished. For one thing, she knew what a noise there would be in the house all day, and she had other reasons. "I declare," she said to the cook, "it seems almost a shame keeping them indoors on a lovely day like this. But they are that audacious, they'll be working on their heads if I don't put my foot down. Here, you make 'em a cake tomorrow for tea, and we'll have baby with us tomorrow, so they can go for a good romp with him out of the way. Now, Elsa, let's see to those beds. Why, it's 10 o'clock and there's no rabbits caught." "It's 10 o'clock and no rabbits caught" is an old saying that means that no work has been done. So, all the others were kept in, but Robert, as I have said, was allowed to go out for half an hour to get something that he wanted. And of course, it was the day's wish. He had no difficulty in finding the sand fairy, for the day was already so hot that it had actually, for the first time, come out of its own accord, and was sitting in a sort of pool of soft sand, stretching itself out, trimming its whiskers, and turning its snail eyes round and around. "Ah!" it said, as its left eye saw Robert. "I've been looking for you. Where are the rest of you? I hope you didn't get smashed up with those wings I gave you the other day."
"No,"
said Robert.
"but the wings got us into a bit of a row, just like all the other wishes do. So the others were kept indoors, and I was only let out for a half hour to get the wish. So please let me wish as quick as I can."
"Wish away," said the Samiade, twisting itself around in the sand. But Robert couldn't wish away. He had forgotten all the things he had been thinking about, and nothing would come to his head but little things he could wish for himself, like candy, or a stamp album, or a pocket knife with 3 blades. He sat down to think better of things that the others would care to have for too, but he thought of things like football or leg guards. "Well," said the Samiade at last, "you'd better hurry up with that wish of yours. Time flies, you know."
"I know it does,"
said Robert.
"I can't think of what to wish for. I wish you could give me one of the others' wishes without their having to come here and ask for it." No!
But it was too late. The Samiade had blown himself out and was 3 times its proper size, and now it collapsed like a bubble that had been pricked. With a deep sigh, it leaned back against the edge of the sand pool and almost fainted with the effort. "There," it said in a weak voice. "It was tremendously hard, but I did it. Run along home, or they're sure to wish something silly before you get there." They were quite sure, Robert felt, as he ran home. He was deeply occupied with all the sorts of wishes he might find they had wished in his absence. They might wish for rabbits, or white mice, or chocolate, or even a fine day tomorrow. And someone might have even said, "I do wish that Robert would hurry up." Well, he was hurrying up, and so they would have their wish then, and the day would be completely wasted. Then he tried to think what they could wish for, something that would be amusing indoors. That had been his own difficulty from the beginning. So few things were amusing indoors when there was sun and sunshine outside, however much you may want to do so. Robert was running as fast as he could. Then he turned the corner, which should have brought him into view of the top of the house, or the architect's nightmare, as Father said. Then he suddenly stopped short, for there was no house to be seen, but the front garden railing was gone, and there, where the house should be standing, was something else. Robert rubbed his eyes and looked again. Yes, the others had made their wish. There was no doubt about it, and they must have wished that they lived in a castle, for there a castle stood, black and stately, and very tall and broad, with battlements and lance windows, and 8 great towers. And where the garden and the orchard had been, there were white things dotted with mushrooms. Robert walked slowly, and as he got nearer, he saw that they were tents, and men in armor. Among the tents, crowds and crowds of them.
Oh,
said Robert.
They've wished for a castle, and it's being sieged. It's just like that sand fairy. I wish we'd never seen that beastly thing.
At the little window above the great gate, across the moat that now lay where the garden had been almost half an hour ago, someone was waving something pale and dust-covered. Robert thought it was one of Cyril's handkerchiefs. They had never been white since the day they toppled over the inkwell. Robert waved back and immediately felt he had been unwise, for this was a signal he had seen by the besieging force, and 2 men in steel caps were coming towards him. They had high brown boots on their long legs, and they came towards him with such great stride that Robert remembered the shortness of his own legs, and he did not run away. He feared it might be irritating to these men if he did, so he stood still, and the 2 men seemed quite pleased with him. "By my Harlem," said one, "a brave varlet this." Robert felt pleased at being called brave, and somehow it made him feel brave. He passed over the varlet. It was the way that people talked in historical romances, he knew, and it was evidently not meant to be rude. He only hoped he would be able to understand what they said to him, as he had not always been able to follow the conversations in these historical romance books. "He's gotta be strange," said one. "Some outlandish treachery, belike. Say, lad, what brings thee hither?" Robert knew this meant, "Now then, youngster, what are you up to?" And so he said,
"If you please, I want to go home."
"Go then," said the man in the long boots. "None hindereth, and not let us to follow. Gazooks," he added in a cautious undertone, "I misdoubt me, but he hindereth tidings to the besieged." "Where dwellest thou, young knave?" inquired the man in the large steel cap.
Over there,
said Robert, and directly he knew he ought to have said yonder. "Ha, sayest thou?" rejoined the long-bootsed man. "Come hither, boy. This is matter for our leader." And so the leader Robert was dragged forthwith, reluctantly, by the ear. The leader was the most glorious creature Roger had ever seen. He was exactly like the picture books Robert had often admired. He had armor and helmet and a shining horse and a crest and feathers and a shield and a lance and a sword. His armor and weapons were all, to be sure, of different historical periods. The sword was from the era of Charles I. The helmet was from the Second Crusades. The arms and the shield were very grand, 3 red running lions on a blue field. The tents were the latest in modern warfare, and the whole appearance of the camp and army and leader was a mishmash of time periods. But Robert was dumb with admiration. It all seemed to be right, in a way, because he knew no more of heraldry or archaeology than what was drawn in picture books, and they are often quite wrong, as you should know. He admired it all and felt much braver. "Come hither, lad," said the glorious leader. Then the man in the steel cap said a few eager words, and he took off his helmet, because he could not see properly with it on. He had a kind face and long fair hair. "Have no fear, thou shalt take no scythe," he said. Robert was glad of that. He wondered what scythe was, and if it was nastier than the medicine which he had sometimes been given by Martha. "Unfold thy tale without alarm," said the leader kindly. "Whence thou comest, and what is thine intent?"
"My what?"
said Robert.
"What seekest thou to accomplish? What is thine errand that thou wanderest here alone among these rough men-at-arms? Poor child, thy mother's heart acheth for thee."
"I don't think so,"
said Robert.
You see, she doesn't know I'm out.
The leader wiped away a manly tear, exactly as the leader in historical romances would have done. And he said, "Fear not to speak the truth, my child. Thou hast not to fear from Wilfric de Talmot." Roger had a wild feeling that this glorious leader of the besieging party, being himself part of a wish, would be able to understand better than Martha, or the gypsies, or the policeman in Rochester, or the clergyman from yesterday, the true tale of the wishes and the Sammaid. The only difficulty he knew, he could never remember what quoteths and bestreweth me and things like that make his talk sound like the talk in historical books. However, he began boldly enough with the sentence straight out of the Boy Crusader. He said,
"Gramus me, for thy courtesy, fair Sir Knight. The fact is, it only looks like that, and I hope you're not in a hurry, because the story is rather a breather. Mother and father are away, and we went down to play in the sandpit, and we found a Sammaid."
"I cry thee mercy, Sammaid," said the knight.
"Yes, it's a sort of fairy, or enchanter. Yes, that's it, an enchanter. And he said we could have a wish every day, and we wished first to be beautiful."
"Thy wish was scarce granted," said one of the men-at-arms, looking at Robert, who went on as if he had not heard, though he thought this remark very rude indeed.
"And then we wished for money, treasure, and we couldn't spend it. And yesterday we wished for wings, and we got them, and we had quite a good time at the start."
"Thy speech is strange," said Sir Wilfric de Talbot. "Repeat thy words. What dost thou?"
Ripping. I mean, a jolly. No, we were content with our lot. And that's what I meant. Only after we got into an awful fix."
"What is a fix? A fray, mayhaps?"
"Well, no, not a fray. A tight place."
"A dungeon? Alas, for thy youthful fettered arms," said the knight, with sympathy.
"It wasn't a dungeon exactly. We just, encountered undeserved misfortune,"
Robert explained.
"And today we were punished by not being allowed to go out. That's where I live."
He pointed to the castle.
"The others are all in there, and they're not allowed to go out. It's all the Sammaid, and, well, I mean the enchanter's fault, and I wish we'd never seen him."
"He is an enchanter of might."
"Oh, yes, of might, rather."
"And thou deemest that this is a spell of the enchanter thou hast angered, that thou have lent strength to the besieging party," said the gallant leader. "But now, though, that Wilfric de Talbot needs no enchanter's aid to lead his followers to victory."
"No, I'm sure you don't,"
said Robert, with hasty courtesy.
Of course not. You shouldn't, you know, but all the same, it's partly his fault. But we're mostly to blame. You couldn't have done anything if it hadn't been for us."
Now, bold boy," said Sir Wilfric haughtily, "thy speech is dark, and scarce courteous. Unravel me this riddle."
"Oh,"
said Robert desperately.
"Of course, you don't know it. But, see, you're not real. You're only here because the others must have been idiot enough to wish for a castle. When the sun sets, you'll just vanish away, and it'll be all right."
The captain and the men-at-arms exchanged glances, at first pityingly, and then sterner. And the long-boot man said, "Beware, my noble lord, the urchin doth but feign madness to escape our clutches. Should we bind him?"
"I'm no more mad than you are,"
said Robert angrily.
"Perhaps not so much. Only, I was an idiot to think you'd understand anything. Let me go. I haven't done anything to you."
"Whether," said the knight, who seemed to have believed all of this enchanter story, until it came to his own part in it, "whether wast thou wind?" Robert knew this meant, "Where would you go?" And so he said,
"Home, of course,"
and pointed to the castle.
To carry news of your sorcerer? Nay.
All right, then.
said Robert, struck by a sudden idea.
Then let me go somewhere else.
His mind sought eagerly among the memories of historical romances.
Sir Wilfrid de Talbot,
He said slowly.
should think foul scorn to keep to keep one who has done him no hurt, when he wants to cut off quietly, to depart without violence.
This to my face? Beshrew thee for a knave, replied Sir Wilfrid.
But the appeal seemed to have gone home.
Yea, thou sayest sooth, he added thoughtfully. Go where thou wilt, he added nobly. Thou art free. Wilfrid de Talbot weareth not with babes. Jackin here shall bear thee company.
All right,
Said Robert wildly.
Joggin will enjoy himself, I think. Come on, Joggin. Sir Wilfrid, I salute thee.
He saluted, in the modern military manner, and set off running for the sandpit. Jackin's long boots kept up easily. He found the sandperry, he dug it up, he woke it up, and implored it to give him just one more wish.
I've done 2 today already, it grumbled, and 1 was a stiff bit of work if ever I did.
Oh, do,
Said Robert, while Jackin looked on with an expression of open-mouthed horror at the strange creature. Well, what is it? Snapped the Samaid with cross sleepiness. I wish I was with the others, said Robert, and the Samaid began to swell. Robert never thought of wishing the castle and the siege away. Of course he knew it had all come out of a wish, but swords and daggers and pikes and lances seemed much too real to be wished away. Robert lost consciousness for an instant. When he opened his eyes, the others were crowding around him. We never heard you come in, they said.
How awfully jolly of you to wish it to give us our wish. Of course we understood that was what you'd done. But you ought to have told us. Suppose we wish something silly.
Silly,
Said Robert, very crossly indeed.
how much sillier could you have been? I'd like to know. You nearly settled me, I can tell you that.
But he told his story, and the others admitted that it had certainly been rough on him. But they praised his courage and cleverness so much that he presently got back his lost temper and felt braver than ever, content to be captain of a besieged force. We haven't done anything yet, said Anthea comfortably. We waited for you. We're going to shoot them through these little loopholes with bows and arrows that Uncle gave us. You should have first shot.
I don't think I would.
Said Robert cautiously.
You don't know what they're like down there. They've got real bows and arrows, and swords, and pikes, and daggers, and all sorts of sharp things. They're all quite real. It's not just like a picture in a fairy book. They can hurt us. They could even kill us. Have you explored the castle? Because I think we better let them alone as long as they leave us alone. We can get ready for an attack. Are there soldiers in the castle to defend it?
I don't know, said Cyril. You see, directly I'd wish that we were in a besieged castle, and everything seemed to go upside down. And it came that we were strange. We were looking out a window and saw this camp and things and you, and of course we kept on looking at everything. Isn't this room grand? It's as real can be. It was. It was a square with stone walls 4 feet thick and great beams for ceiling. A low door at the corner led to a flight of steps. Up and down the children went down and found themselves in a great arched gatehouse, with enormous doors were shut and barred. There was a window in a little turret at the bottom of the round turret. Up the stairs wound, rather larger than the other windows, and looking through it they saw that the drawbridge was up and the portcullis down. The moat looked very wide and deep. Opposite the great door that led to the moat was another great door, with a little door on it. The children went through this, and found themselves in a big courtyard, with the great grey walls of the castle rising dark and heavy on all 4 sides. Near the middle of the courtyard stood Martha, moving her hands backward and forward in the air, The cook was stooping down, moving her hands also in a very curious way. But the oddest thing of all, and at the same time most terrible, was the lamb. He was sitting on nothing, 3 feet above the ground, laughing happily. The children ran towards him. Just as Anthea was reaching out her arms to take him, Martha said crossly, "Let him alone, do, miss. He's being good." "But what's he doing?" said Anthea. "Doing? He's sitting in his high chair, good as gold, watching me doing the ironing. Now run along, you. My iron's getting cold." She went towards the cook and seemed to poke an invisible fire with an unseen fire poker. The cook seemed to be putting an unseen dish in an invisible oven. "Run along with you, do," she said. "I'm behind as it is. You won't get no dinner if you come hindering me like this. Go on, go on." "You're sure the lamb's all right?" asked Jane anxiously. "Right as 9pence, if you don't come unsettling him. I thought you'd like to be rid of him for a while. But if you want him, well, for goodness sakes—" No, they said, and hastened away. They would have to defend the castle presently, and the lamb was safer, even suspended in mid-air, in an invisible kitchen, than in a guardhouse in a besieged castle. They went through the first doorway they came to, and sat helplessly down on a wooden bench that ran along the bottom side. "How awful!" said Anthea and Jane together, and Jane added, "I feel as if I'm in a lunatic asylum." "What does it mean?" said Anthea. "It's creepy. I don't like it. Oh, I wish we'd wished for something plain, like a rocking horse."
"It's no use wishing now,"
said Robert bitterly, and Cyril said, "Do be quiet. I want to think." He buried his face in his hands, and the others looked about them. They were in a long room with an arched roof. There were wooden tables along it, and one across at the end of the room, on a sort of raised platform. The room was very dim and dark. The floor was strewn with dry things, like twigs, and smelled very nice. Cyril sat up and said, "Look here, it's all right. I think it's like this. You know, we wish that the servants shouldn't notice any difference when we got our wishes. And nothing happened to Lamb unless we specifically wished for it. So, of course, they didn't notice the castle or anything. And the castle's in the same spot as our house is. So that means the servants have gone on being in the house, and they wouldn't notice the castle. But you can't have a castle mixed up with your house. And so we can't see the house because we see the castle, and they can't see the castle because they go on seeing the house. And so—" "Oh, don't," said Jane. "You make my head go all swimmy. It doesn't matter. Only I hope we shall be able to see our dinner, because if that's invisible too, we won't be able to eat it. I tried to feel the lamb's chair, and there's nothing under him at all. We can't eat air, and I feel as though breakfast was ages and ages ago." "It's no use thinking about it," said Anthea. "Let's go on exploring. Perhaps we might find something to eat." This lightened hope in every heart, and they went exploring the castle. But though it was most perfect and delightful castle you could possibly imagine, and furnished in the most complete and beautiful manner, neither food nor men-at-arms were to be found in it. "If only you'd wish that the besieged castle were thoroughly garrisoned and provisioned," said Jane reproachfully. "You can't think of everything," said Anthea. "I should think it must be nearly lunchtime by now." It wasn't, but they hung about, watching the strange movements of the servants in the middle of the courtyard, because, of course, they couldn't be sure where the dining room of this invisible house was. Presently, they saw Martha carry an invisible tray across the courtyard, and it seemed that, by a most fortunate accident, the dining room of the house and the banquet hall of the castle were the same place. But oh, how their hearts sank when they perceived that the tray was invisible. They waited in wretched silence, while Martha went through the form of carving an unseen leg of mutton, serving invisible greens and potatoes with a spoon that no one could see. And when she left the room, the children looked at the empty table, and then at each other.
"This is worse than anything,"
said Robert, who had not until now been particularly keen on lunch.
"I'm not so very hungry," said Anthea, trying to make the best of things as usual. Cyril tightened his belt obstinately, and Jane burst into tears.